Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Bible study this morning. What we're doing for the Advent season is a little bit different. Instead of having a book or a specific chapter or something like that we're looking at, doing a little bit of a hodgepodge this morning, a little bit of a few different things. It's interdisciplinary would be the fancy way to say it. We're recording this for folks at home for our midweek message. If you can't make it on Sundays for whatever reason, we're going to record these and see how that goes. But what I've done is I've found a worship series for Advent. It's supposed to be for Wednesday nights in Advent or some sort of midweek series, and it's called Holy Darkness. And it takes some of those themes that you hear about in Advent of light and dark, or the stars, or think of the Advent wreath and the candles that we have. We often focus in on the stars or the bright angels bringing in the news of Jesus' birth. We talk about the light and the darkness that gives us the hope. But for this series, what we're going to talk about is the darkness itself and how God is still present in the darkness. God is still working in the dark. It's not one or the other. God is present in the light and the dark. So for these 4 weeks, we'll be talking about the darkness and maybe that interplay of light and dark. So each week we'll be looking at a passage of scripture. We'll be looking at least one song each week. I don't know if people want to sing or not, but it's there as a devotion, as a prayer. And we'll be reflecting on some different aspects of darkness. So for week 1, our theme is Darkness is Holy. Kind of sets the tone. Here's kind of the premise. Oftentimes in Advent, darkness is used as a negative foil. Okay, so the implication is that if God's presence, God's goodness is in the light, kind of the implication is that darkness is therefore the absence of God, or that darkness is, somehow the evil side of the coin. If light is good, darkness is bad. If darkness is God's absence, light is God's presence. So sometimes we do that. We'll have a prayer or a meditation and we'll light a candle, and that'll represent God's presence or the Spirit's presence in our midst. And you can focus in on the light of the candle as a touchstone as you pray. But there's this sort of implied opposite, that without the light or in the darkness, you don't have God. So that's what we're kind of turning on its head a little bit in this series, is that God is present in the darkness as well. If you think of John 1, that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and in the beginning was light, and the light did not, what was it? The darkness did not overcome the light. Let me just read it, then I'm not trying to flail about here. So there's a verse in John 1 that John the Baptist came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome. Okay, so right away you have this light and darkness thing. Darkness is also holy. Darkness is also a medium of God. Darkness is also something that God created and separated and called good in the story of creation. And so our main text today is going to be that creation story, Genesis chapter 1. We've got some Bibles here, a few different translations, but there you go, pass these out. If you have a Bible on your phone or if you brought one with you, that's great. Here's a couple more. I'll get mine out of my briefcase so we can read these out. Genesis 1. Yep. We'll start at the very beginning, like the sound of music. We're going to read verses 1 through 5, and then we're going to skip ahead to 14 through 19. We're going to get into the parts of the creation story in Genesis 1 that focus on the light. Would somebody like to read verses 1 through 5? Thank you.
In the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God said that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
Thank you. And could somebody else please read verses 14 through 19?
I will.
Thank you.
And God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let there be lights in the dome of the sky to give light on earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. God set them in the dome of the earth to give light upon the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day.
Thank you. And then I'd like to draw your attention to chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their multitude. And on the seventh day, God finished the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation. And then I got a little bit ahead of myself. Chapter 1, verse 31. That's where I meant to start. God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. In the Jewish way of counting days, you start at evening. That's why Sabbath starts at sundown. So evening and morning. That's partly how you get 3 days from Good Friday to Easter. You think, well, that's not 3 days. Well, it started during the day of Good Friday, and then the next day starts at sundown Friday night, goes till Saturday. That's 2, and then sundown Saturday starts the 3rd day until you get to Easter morning. That's if you've ever wondered where those 3 days came from between Friday to Sunday, it's because you start with the day of Friday, and then the next day starts at sundown. So with each of these days, you have night and day. At the very end of all creation, everything that God put in order and separated and classified and created, everything was good, and it was very good. And that includes the night. And that includes the night in which the different lights, the sun and the moon and the stars, hang in and give light to. The night is not excluded from the goodness that God declares over the whole of creation. I think that's important to point out. I was at a pastor's meeting a couple of weeks ago, and we took some time to look ahead at the lessons for Advent to, see if we had any ideas we could share with each other. And one of the other pastors said, "I don't think that we today in modern times have any conception of how dark it used to be at night. There was no electricity. There was no, lamps and oil even were a little bit scarce because you had to ration those things. When the sun went down, you were done. You were done for the day. If the moon was out, you maybe had a little light or the stars, but that was it. They were a little farther south in the latitude, so the days were a little more even, maybe not as skewed as what we get up here in the northern hemisphere. But I don't think we understand how dark it is. Maybe you've been camping, maybe you've been in some wilderness areas away from any lights. But I do want to point out there's a thing called light pollution, where the ambient glow from the city or whatever. I remember sitting, I grew up in a town and outside of a town, and I could look to the east and see Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. I could see the glow in the sky. That was only 35,000 people. So think of these big cities all over the world now, and all the lights and all the phones and there's always light and screens and everything now. Imagine what it would have been like that when the sun went down, that was it. Complete darkness. In your home, it's dark. Outside, it's dark. Darkness was much more a part of life for the people in the Bible than it was for us. And in that darkness, you were limited. So darkness could be seen as something scary, something chaotic. Go back to creation. Darkness is part of the order of creation, and it is called good, even very good. It's part of the balance. It's part of what complements the light and the dark. So darkness isn't inherently bad, but you are limited in the darkness. Part of that creation story at the very beginning, it says, when the earth was formless and void. In Hebrew, it's a fun rhyming phrase. It's tohu vavohu, and it means formlessness and normlessness. There was just this chaos. There was this nothingness. But there was not nothing. There was stuff there that God created with, got separated. But in this creation story, it's about God putting things in order, separates the light from the darkness. There was day, there was night. There was the sun, there was the moon and the stars. There was vegetation, there was water. There was the dome in the sky, and water's up there and water's under the dome. Everything is put in order and classified, and order is brought out of chaos. But it's always things together. It's always night and day, light and dark, moon and sun, waters above and waters below. There's always these both ands, these relationships that complement each other. Maybe their intention, light and dark don't coexist necessarily unless you have like the little candle within the darkness. But it's still ordered and called good. It's still acceptable. It's still viable. When it's that word good, it means, yes, it's good. I like it. But it also means that it has function. It has purpose. Nothing that God does is without purpose or even beauty. I wonder if you have any stories of good darkness. I mentioned maybe camping out in the wilderness. Do you have stories of a time when you were in the dark, the literal dark, where it was purposeful, life-giving, creative? I want to hear some good dark stories. Gladys.
When I was a teenager, I was doing some babysitting for this couple next door. And they went out, and it was probably about 3 o'clock when they came home. When I say next door, in the country, it was probably a city block away.
Sure.
And I don't know if they offered me a ride home or not, but I remember going out and it was pitch dark. I ran down the road to get home. And it was dark.
So why is that why is that a good memory? Because you're smiling as you tell it.
I got home safely, but it was like, well, there's nothing out here that's different from the daytime.
Yeah.
I didn't think anyway.
Yeah.
And I knew all the animals in the area, the pets and the deer. Well, they're more afraid of us than they are. Yeah. We are them.
So you were safe and you got through it, but it wasn't any different, but it was. It was all the same stuff.
All the same stuff, but it was dark.
But it was
and
dark.
I ran.
And you ran.
And God was with me. And God was with me. Yes. He was pushing me along. Pulling me.
Little of both.
He was right there with me.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, we'd have this girls, there were 7 of us who were really good friends. We had a lot of sleepovers. We weren't supposed to, but we would sneak out in the middle of the night. And of course,
getting all sorts of stories.
we thought it was great fun to climb trees in the middle of the night or wander around the neighborhoods or
Sure.
And maybe I shouldn't tell this one at all. We also swiped watermelons off of the boys were in on this one. We swiped watermelons off of the truck that one of the girls had and enjoyed the fun.
Okay.
Anyway, it was fun times when I was a kid. I probably shouldn't have been doing some of these things, but it just was Iowa.
Yeah.
So I'll come back to you. I just wanted to touch on Gladys really quick that sometimes maybe in the darkness you're going to notice God with you a little more because maybe you need that presence a little bit more, and then you can have fun in the dark. You can have that camaraderie.
I don't think we were thinking about God.
No, and I'm not all of this has to come back to God, but for your story, Donna, you can do some fun stuff. You can get into some hijinks. You can have some adventures with your friends in the dark because it's a different feel. You're kind of
You think
sneaking
you're
out.
protected
That's right.
from your parents.
Yeah. So darkness gives you some cover.
One of the things I got when I used to do a lot of deer hunting, you'd be out there before sunrise, and you're really out in the boonies. especially in Virginia, Bedford County or somewhere like that. It's really out there, nothing out there. And when I got from it that time, well, besides being the coldest time of the day, sun pops up. But before that is tranquility. I mean, you can hear squirrels walking in the weeds. I mean, it's probably the most calmest time I've ever been. Where I was stressful business I was in, everything else. I could actually just not have any stress at all. You be sitting there and you're, like I said, the squirrels walking in the weeds, all the noises. And at that time of morning, there is no wind. It doesn't kick up until the sun starts coming up. So it's the most tranquil time that I've ever been in.
So even though there's nocturnal creatures, there's life, there's things happening at night. Tranquil. Most things are asleep. And that break from the stress or whatever else was going on.
Stress isn't around.
I'm not personally a morning person, but I know that before the sun comes up at that coldest time, everything's resting. And it is. It's incredibly peaceful. Yeah, it's incredibly peaceful.
I don't know if this qualifies as a dark story, but I think of it as a darkness story. But two instances where I had the opportunity to see a majestic sky. The once when I was at college, my girlfriend's parents on a farm in Crumble, and they were away for the weekend, so a bunch of us went down and stayed at the house. And because of there is not a lot of light pollution around there, the sky was just lit up. I mean, there was barely space between the stars, and we were like laying on our backs, you know, looking at the sky. One of my girlfriends, I'll never forget this. She said they used to call me. She still does. I wonder if there's a Susie and a Petey out there looking back at us.
Sure.
And then we used to do this at the beach also. My family would go when the Crusades meteor shower was taking place, and laying there on the beach in the cold at night, cold with blankets, you know, etc. But there's also very little light pollution, you know, and looking for shooting stars, you know. But with like my nieces, my children, you know, my brother was probably there, you know, we're just looking up at the skies, you know, and it's kind of like just being in awe of creation.
Yeah.
Without the dark, we wouldn't have seen that, you know. So, as I said, I don't know if it qualifies as a dark thing.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I think John and I took that as kids.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I
sure.
think you and I took that as kids because
If you grew up rural, yeah. I can tell a story. So in Minnesota, I was supposed to preside at a wedding. Well, the weddings were getting everything's ready to go and everything's lined up. And then it was in December. And sure enough, the forecast starts to shift as the week goes on. And they're forecasting a gigantic blizzard to come through Saturday. Starts Saturday morning, and it's like, there's no way the wedding's going to happen. So the couple scrambles, and they decide, they call everybody involved with the wedding, me, the musicians, the photographer, everybody, all the guests, and they say, we're going to have our wedding at midnight. So it's still the same date because they had things engraved. They didn't want to change the date. But I said, we're going to still have our wedding the same day. Can you all come at midnight? And so we said, sure. And in that sanctuary, they had this decoration called the Star of David. And it was basically like a big candelabra, I guess, but it was in the shape sort of a Star of David. And all these little lights were up there. And so we did this wedding at midnight. And the lights, there was no light coming in from the windows. There was some light inside. You had the Star of David hanging from above. We had the wedding. It was beautiful. I don't think the wedding would have been the same during the day because it was like this little sanctuary before the storm in the night. And everybody was there. The wedding got off. Everybody got home and sheltered before the blizzard came through. And there did end up being like 15 inches of snow, and it was out on the prairie, so there's wind. But I'll always remember that sort of feeling of kind of almost being like in a snow globe before the snow, like just all kind of tucked into the sanctuary at midnight having this wedding.
that's cool. There should be more midnight weddings.
It was kind of neat. It was. So yeah, I think a lot of folks' first knee-jerk reaction when you think darkness is things that go bump in the night. Kids are afraid of the dark. You got to be safe in the dark. people get out at night and do stuff they're not supposed to do, sometimes for fun. But darkness means you kind of get home and get safe, right? Or be careful driving at night, it's something to be careful of. But you start telling stories, and darkness has a holiness to it too. Darkness has a goodness to it as well.
I think about Christmas Eve service.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A Christmas Eve service at 11 o'clock at night, to me, is more meaningful than one at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, but.
Yeah. Something special. I remember we had a 11 o'clock service as a kid growing up, and the choir would sing. You'd be going home after 12, or maybe it was 10 o'clock, but you'd still be going home pretty late. And it's different. Wow.
It's very special.
It is. So there's some sacredness to darkness and to nighttime. It's not something that we always talk about, because we do focus on the candle that gets you through the dark. We focus in on the light in the middle of the darkness, when really God is definitely active at work, doing holy things in the darkness as well. Now there's a method in the art world called Chiaroscuro. Have you heard of this? Chiaroscuro. It's this interplay between light and dark.
Oh,
And so there's these different methods and artists over the years. It's a common thing, but different people use it in different ways. And you use this interplay of light and dark to highlight things, to make things stand out. If you are able to gather around the screen, I do have some show and tell. Maybe next week, if I do show and tell again, I'll set up a big screen. But if you're able to gather around, I'll do a screen share, so you won't be on the camera. All they will see on the video is the show and tell. Okay.
Pastor, we might be able to see after that TV.
Yeah, but I don't want to stop to do that in the middle of recording. So yeah, I know, but next time. All right, so gather around, folks.
you haven't screen shared yet, I saw.
I did. I screen shared. All they can see, right? They might see like this little tiny inset. That's all.
Okay.
So
Is there one there?
So here's a couple of things. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but this is from an art instructor. It's a theory of light and shade, and it just has some examples. So this is more of a step-by-step process, but there's different shades, light and dark. Here's the same color in all of them, so you can see how there's like different ways you can make the light and dark play off of each other. Chiaroscuro, value describes volume and depth of space in European artists of the Renaissance. They were concerned with showing depth and volume in opposition to the artists of the Dark Ages. So in the Renaissance, there was this rebirth of artistic achievements, mathematical achievements. Luther and Melanchthon got in on this in terms of going back. A lot of people went back to the Greek and Roman roots. Well, they went back to Greek and Hebrew in the Bible. So the Renaissance helped fuel a lot of this new stuff. Renaissance artists manufactured the term chiaroscuro to describe how light and dark can imply depth and volume. The word chiaroscuro is a combination of two Italian words that mean light and dark. Chiaro is clear light, oscuro, like obscure, dark. Atmospheric or aerial perspective was one of the artistic strategies. You don't need to do that. But so this is just a drawing. This is somebody took sketching and made shadows.
So it's not a photograph.
Not a
No,
photograph.
It's drawing, but it's
Yeah.
a two-dimensional.
So you take a 2D thing and by the shading, by the interplay of light and dark, you make it have depth. Intuitive space, a trick that the artist uses. And so you have to figure out where your light source is from. And then you have, like on a sphere like this, you have the bright side, and then the shadow, and then it casts a shadow.
That's called vanishing point.
You can do it with different, three-dimensional shapes. Again, you have your light source, highlight, where's the shine, like the gleam in somebody's eye. And then, lots of different techniques here. Okay.
It's like the phases of the moon.
It is like the phases of the moon. It's like eclipses. I saw a picture just the other day from National Geographic. There was a satellite in space that caught a picture of the dark side of the moon with the Earth in the background. Like the moon had gotten between the satellite, and it was the coolest thing to see the moon. And it was usually you see the other way around. So part of what this does is it can change your perspective. It can make you see something in a different way. Here's another one. So you have the shade, the light side of the tree, the shady part of the tree, and then, everybody's got shadows. So you have to make sure you know where your light source is. Here's a couple of artistic ones. Where's the shade? Where's the light? You can use this technique to make things really pop. And that's what I want to show you with these. There's an artist named Michelangelo Merisi de Caravaggio, an Italian painter. Have you ever heard of Caravaggio? I've always wanted to take an art survey. I've never done it before, but I've peeked in a little bit. And Caravaggio was really renowned for his use of chiaroscuro. Here are some examples of some of his biblical works. This is a website called Art and the Bible. So it tries to collect lots of different artistic representations of stories and characters from the Bible. So for instance, he really liked St. John the Baptist. So here's the beheading of St. John the Baptist. So it's a very dark scene in general, like dark in the metaphorical sense. But what stands out? Well, here's some people, just ready with the basket. But where does the light draw your eye? Right to this guy. I should use my arrow for the folks at home. Right here for this person holding John down. Okay, that's one example. The betrayal of Christ. Here comes Judas with his kiss. Where is the light in this? Brings you right to their faces. Is there other light? Yeah, there's gleams on the armor. Okay, so this is not something happening peacefully. It brings your eye to the armor, brings your eye to these faces of people coming, but what's really highlighted, they're holding hands and this kiss of betrayal. There's a lot of darkness in the background of these paintings. Let's see. Here's a more subtle one. This is the denial of St. Peter out in the dark of the courtyard. Okay, and he's denying, no, I don't know who he is. I'm not one of those Galileans. So here in the dark, here's the soldier. Here's Peter, their face turned away. Again, I don't have the art degree where I could really unpack this, but I can see what my eye is drawn to. And as we're in the dark, only certain things stand out in what limited light there is. There's another artist I wanted to show you. His name is Gustave Doré, French illustrator and etcher. So if you're doing etchings, if you're doing imprints, then you have to have this light and dark contrast for things to stand out. But he did illustrations for over 100 books, among which the Bible, some fairy tales, some other stuff were prominent. So this guy had a lot of illustrations, like this is Death on the Pale Horse from Revelation. Come on, load, load, load. I mean, this is just black and white, but here comes all the monsters, but who stands out?
He uses the light beautifully.
Yeah. Elijah's ascension. Yeah, you're looking up here. Who's left behind in the shadow? Elisha.
That was cool.
Yeah. So again, I wish I knew more about art, that I could get technical with it. Here's a different one. Satan descends upon earth. In a bunch of light, here's something really dark. So anyway, this is just a little show and tell, like I said, to show you that when you're doing this artistic stuff, you can really make things pop. Here's somebody looking at a reflection, somebody very much in the window in an empty room, Then you get into tenebrism, which is violent chiaroscuro. It's much more focusing on the dark. But it can also be simple patterns like yin yangs like this. Maybe you've seen some more geometric stuff. Maybe you've seen the one that was from, what was the movie? The Guy Fawkes mask, the black and white kind of stylized thing. Yeah. So there's lots of different.
MCS.
Oh, that was
Yes.
That
Yeah.
abstract stuff is neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can do a lot with this. All right. You can sit back down. So it's a treatment of light and shade in drawing and painting, chiaroscuro. It's an effect of contrasted light and shadow created by light falling unevenly or from a particular direction on something. So we have these examples. And so for fun, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm not that artistic. But one thing that I've talked about in seasons like Lent is that we're gathered in the shadow of the cross. Luther talked about the theology of the cross, that a theologian of glory would see God where the earth, people of the world sees power. like in the rich and the mighty kings and things like that. But a theologian of the cross realized that God's greatest act of power was in Jesus dying on the cross. And so then that means all of us are supposed to find the true expression of God at the foot of the cross. Who else is at the foot of the cross? All those who are needy, all those who are sinful, all those who are coming to Jesus at the foot of the cross. So Luther talked a lot about the theology of the cross, finding God in this unexpected way. And in some ways, we still are under the shadow of the cross, also the light of the resurrection. So what I have is just a plain cross. I'm going to give you each one. If you have a pen or something to write with, I've got some pencils here. Do any of you have some drawing ability?
Susie does. She's back there being very secret.
So at the very least, what I'm wanting you to do is just pick a light source. So let's say the light's coming this way. Just shade it so the shadow's on the other side.
Oh, yes, me too. I will. Okay.
There's some pencils. There's some more coming around. So just for fun, I don't know what to expect from this, but just to play with this idea of light and shadow, pick where you want your light source to come from and make a shadow. That's the most basic. If you want to get fancier with it, and you need another one?
No. I was just gonna say, we're talking about the darkness, but if you want to talk dark, light.
Yeah.
Moving clips a couple years ago.
Yeah.
We were down in Nashville. We got the wood base. And it was very interesting. When we got professional other this is one. When it got to be a full eclipse,
Mhm.
frogs and crickets all came out.
Really?
And made noise. It's quiet, and all of a sudden, you hear all this noise, and then as it receded, they went away.
Yeah.
And it was just we were in the middle of nowhere, no light, except sun. Still has obviously good sun. But apparently they just sensed that they thought it was coming up with the evening, and they all came out.
That's really neat.
And I guess because we were out in the middle of the city, we had everything else. Whatever they do, I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's a real experience. It's just eerie.
That is eerie. But yeah, there's this whole connection, circadian rhythms when you're sleeping, but there's this whole connection in nature that we're kind of missing, I think sometimes. Let's see. Does anybody else need a pencil? Take one. See, you guys are even getting fancier than I was expecting. I was just gonna shade one side of the cross. Like I wasn't even drawing a shadow.
Oh, I heard brush shadow.
Oh, you can. But here, I'll show you what I was like. This is my level of art expertise. Here, I'll make it thicker for the audience at home. But I was even thinking just something like this. Just that little bit of edging to give it some depth. But I'm seeing people like make full shadows behind it.
Well, yours is hanging on a wall, so you might.
Oh, there you go. But that's the whole idea of this. That's the idea of this exercise. It's all about perspective. Yeah. And so yeah, if you want to embellish this, you can. If you want to add other stuff, like I said, I'm not an artsy person. But in some ways, I think this is similar to the difference between kind of the stereotypical Catholic Lutheran cross crucifix thing. Most Catholic churches have a crucifix. Jesus still hanging on the cross, the wounds very evident. Most Protestant churches, maybe we'll have some crucifixes, but a lot of times we'll just have an empty cross on the wall. We got one right there. I don't know, any others in this room? One prominent one over here. There's one on the wall over there. Which is to say the cross is still a reality, but it's empty now. Jesus is raised. Both represent something. Both have a different side of the story, a different perspective. A couple of years in our last congregation, we had gray tulle, like a light gauzy fabric, and we draped a cross literally over the congregation, one from the front cross all the way to the back of the sanctuary, like 20 feet another across the middle. So we literally were gathering under the shadow of the cross. You can do a lot of stuff artistically. That's not my gift.
Art director now.
Sure, sure. I can come up with ideas. I just can't execute it. Anybody else want to show and tell for the folks at home? You can find. Yeah, can I borrow yours? You're really close by. This is what James did, our peerless council president. That's really cool.
Oh, wow.
You know?
Hey, let me know if you need a
Right.
shadow
Anybody
for your
else?
cross.
Let's see. Do some more show and tell. Here's Darren's. You made yours like a 3-dimensional. That's straight line. Roger, you want to show? Yep, we got Rogers over here.
Mine's third grade level.
Hey, so this is interesting though. So here's what Donna did. She put the light on the front of the cross.
I just called it shading. I didn't think about shadow.
Oh yeah, but here's a star. I like this. You put a star right in the middle.
Well, because I didn't know how to draw Christ, so I just.
Sure, but there's the light coming from there, so that there's even light emanating from this instrument of torture. Oh, look at Anita getting fancy down here. Gladys, you like that?
I don't know what I do.
Yeah, yours almost looks like it's in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all different.
they're all different.
They are all-
So the very first preaching class I ever took, I think it was the second class, we had.
She's the art major.
We got, that's good, that's good. We had 2 different Bible texts split up between us. So out of like 16 of us, 8 had something from Colossians and 8 had something from Ephesians, something like that. So you had 8 sermons on the exact same like 10 verses. Every single person's was different. Maybe they touched on some of the same things. Every single person's was different. And that's the nice thing about working the right side of your brain, is everybody's got a different way to come at this. Skill doesn't matter because each of us can appreciate art even if we don't understand it, even if we can't make it. But having these different perspectives is a good thing. Next week, we're going to get into one more show and tell, and maybe we can hook it up on the TV. But we're going to be looking at different depictions of the Holy Family, different styles, different takes of things. Something I like to do during First Communion class is show about 30 different depictions of the Last Supper. Some of them are sculptures, some of them are paintings, drawings, etchings, mosaics, different periods of time, different parts of the world. And if Christ came to die to save the whole world and every person in it, then I have no issue with different cultures, different ethnicities, showing Christ looking like themselves because he died for them too. So from each different culture and perspective and period of history, we can have these different things. So next week, we're going to do a little bit of that with the Holy
To go
Family.
along with it, Redeemer is having their
That's right.
next week and talk about different, all the questions, they are, I mean, so different from very modern to very old looking ones to, it's definitely worth the $5 to go see them.
So a plug for our friends across the parking lot at Church of Our
Well, they
Redeemer.
give the money all back. It goes to Haiti,
Yeah.
it goes to MSTEP.
MSEP. Yeah, go check out their nativity display coming up next weekend.
This is next Saturday.
Yes.
Next Saturday, which is what, the 5th, 4th and 5th?
It's the same day as the news.
The 4th. So after the movie, after you go watch the Christmas movie, the Chosen movie, come on back to Church of Our Redeemer and see the different creches, the different
When I
nativities.
lived in Roanoke, I had a nativity scene. My daughter was only about a year and a half, 2 years old at the time. So they wanted her as the baby Jesus. For this nativity, would stand out in front of the church, makeshift mock-up thing, and dressed like they were in those days. She was supposed to stay in that manger.
Mhm.
She kept getting run around. She got out of the thing and kept running around the street. around the yard. Couldn't keep her in the manger.
Yeah. And that's what is that called? A living nativity?
Yeah.
They do one over
My
at
nativity.
Royal Point Baptist. They usually do one. They do one last year.
Karen's church.
Full shot.
But that time of year it's pretty cold.
It used to
Yeah.
be,
What?
it
Gary,
used
what's
to
the
be
one?
at Disney.
There's a church on, a Baptist church brought us on Pole Green Road. But
Okay.
you have to go online and get tickets.
That's it. So the one in Shady Grove is just
we won't just show up, you know.
They limit the number of people.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes, I don't know, 45 minutes or an hour to go through all these stages, and they have room for X number of people. You don't have to pay anything, but they need
Just
to have a
yeah.
control room.
Around that, the one that Shady Grove used to was outside, you pulled up, set up your bag chair or whatever you wanted to watch. Just watch.
Oh, and this, you walk through.
Oh, no, this
doors,
was outside.
And they have about 10 different stations, explanations at
Mhm.
each one, and it's really worthwhile.
Right, it's-
Really.
So if you think of this chiaroscuro method, and I'm going to tie this in to the living nativities, to the whole thing. You start with just this, a two-dimensional cross. Two-dimensional anything. Chiaroscuro is this method to use light and darkness to create form, to create depth, to create shape and shadow. And it takes something that's flat and brings more life to it. Just that interplay between light and dark. We have this story of God's salvation going all the way back to creation, coming through Jesus in the manger, Jesus on the cross, the Last Supper, all these memorable scenes from the Bible. We have a yearning to give more depth to them, to bring them to life, to fill in the gaps in the story. So artists take to sculpture or pen and paper or paint in an easel. We have people making movies like the Chosen movie and trying to bring these things to life. We have living nativities. We want to bring depth to the story. God became incarnate in Jesus. That's what we give thanks for in Advent, that already that promise was fulfilled. The Messiah came, and we're waiting for Christ to come again. But God put on flesh because he knows that us human beings are limited and we need tangible stuff. We need things we can touch and see and hear. We need 3 dimensions. We need depth. And so God also put this spirit of creation in us. We are created in the image of God after all. So we have that little bit of that creative spirit in us from God. So here we are, thousands and thousands of years later, still creating, still trying to put depth onto these stories, still trying to bring these things to life, not just for our own selves, so we can still learn and we can still put meaning on it, but also that we can share it with others. And we have these stories of darkness because you need both. You need both the light and the dark. God is not absent from the darkness, but maybe sometimes in the darkness we feel farther away from God. Maybe in that total eclipse, all of a sudden we start calling out like those crickets and frogs that Bill was talking about, like, where is it? Where's the light? But the promise is the light never goes away, but that also God is in the darkness with us as well. That the darkness and the light are both called good at creation. And that, as our theme is today, darkness is holy. Think of the stories we told of the Christmas Eve services, of laying under the stars, of tranquility before dawn. There is holiness within the darkness. It's easy for us to forget it because we get bustling. We want the light, we want to see, but you need the complement and the interplay. I have an assignment for you guys for the week to come. It's loose. But in the week to come, I want you to look for God in darkness, in shadows, in the thing that complements the bright stuff in your life. Maybe if you want to get metaphorical, where is God in grief? Because we focus on the bright, whether it's glaring or twinkly. But that light is complemented by a holy darkness. So I just want you to be mindful this week, intentional, looking for God in darkness, in shadows, in the subtle complements to the bright stuff. Something less obtrusive, but no less holy. So your homework is to look for God in darkness, and then come next week, we'll start with what you saw, telling some stories. And for those at home, if you want to send them in, I'll share them in the group next week. If you want to send me an email or a call or put a comment on the video. But that's your homework this week, is to look for God in darkness and shadows.
You trying to say bright presence of God?
No, just what's God doing in the dark right now? Because God is present, God is active in darkness. But maybe it's not as easy to see sometimes. Maybe you needed to go out to the boonies before the sun came up to really have that moment of, oh.
Oh, I see.
So the less obvious, the shadow of the compliment. So I want you to look for God in the darkness this week. And then as a closing prayer, we're getting done a little early today, guys. I'm sorry. That's all right. As a closing prayer, I'm going to hand out these hymnals. And I'm going to sing a little bit. If you guys want to join in, you can. If you want to just listen, you can. You're probably going to have to share these. Should probably keep one for myself. Oh, I gotta find the number. It's number 245.
Can't wait to hear you sing again.
It's been a little while.
You may have to sing a solo on this one, but I don't be here.
So this one might not be familiar. This is written as a chant. If you ever see something in the hymnal with just the little dots of the notes without the stems, it's a chant. So this is something, as you can see at the bottom, under the hymn, it always has the source that it came from. This was a Latin hymn from the 9th century, from the 800s. And it's been put in hymnals in different versions over the years. But it's called Creator of the Stars of Night. So, I don't know. Roger, would you hit the lights? Might as well go full on. And we got a lot of sunshine coming in from outside. We'll get it a little darker in here.
That
Let's
might have been too much.
okay, get a little bit. Yeah, we do need some light to see. Okay, let me just play the first. Here's how the tune goes. Well, this is to get people some notes, okay? Okay, that's how it starts. Creator of the stars of night, your people's everlasting light. O Christ, Redeemer of us all, we pray you hear us when we call. When this old world drew on toward night, you came, but not in splendor bright, not as the monarch, but the child of Mary, blessed Mother. At your great name, O Jesus, now all knees must bend, all hearts must bow. All things on earth with one accord, like those in heaven, shall call you Lord. Come in your holy might, we pray. Redeem us for eternal day. Defend us while we dwell below. From all assaults of our dread foe. To God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit, three in one. Praise, honor, might, and glory be from age to age, eternal. Amen.
Very nice.
One more story.
No.
as a spectator.
That was it.
So one more story. When I was in seminary, we were encouraged in our first year in our worship class to find some place in the area that was celebrating the 3 days, which is Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Vigil of Easter. Vigil of Easter is something that is kind of making a comeback, but it was this time where folks getting baptized on Easter would do their final rites. It's a service that's supposed to start at midnight on Easter Saturday. And you start outside with a bonfire. You know how we have the large Paschal Christ candle in the
All
church?
senses.
Yeah, it's a really cool ceremony. You start with a bonfire and you put the year on the candle, the new year, and you take that new light, that brand new light from the fire, and you bring it back into the sanctuary. So you're like, and the darkness of that Easter vigil when you don't know if Christ was going to come back, think of the disciples in the upper room. And then you come inside and you do 12 different Bible readings. Think of the disciples gathered around telling stories of God's deliverance in the past. So you tell these 12 stories, you have communion, you have a remembrance of baptism, and you close with a gospel reading right before the Easter story. So it's this really powerful thing. And if you do it right, the full service, it takes like 3 hours. But where we went to celebrate this during seminary was just outside of Dubuque, Iowa. There's New Mallory Abbey. There's this community of monks. And so we went out there at midnight on Saturday and had chants like that, but they do it all the time. They sounded much better. But in this big wood and stone chapel. And if you've ever had a chance, I don't know, there was a fad of Gregorian chant back in the 90s for a while. But if you ever have a chance to go to a convent or an abbey or a monastery and just sit in on the worship and listen to those voices in one unison, fill the space, especially at night, as we talked about with the wedding story or Christmas Eve worship. It really does have a holy feeling to it. So I compare the dark and light is somewhat kind of like in music, notes and rests. Those rests give shape to the notes. Those pauses give you a chance to breathe and give something else to the melody as a whole. So I'll just come back to the beginning where we started with the story of creation. There is dark and there is light, and they are both good. And God is present in both, and there's holiness in both. And the interplay between them helps shape our stories. We'll take that Creator of the stars of night as our closing prayer. Thank you to everybody for your stories, and your singing, your participation, your drawing. Thanks to everybody at home watching. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.